It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Church of St. Mary today. And it's an honor to welcome Mr. Richard Ford to this third edition of Sigtuna Litteraturfestival. Third edition, people. In June 2011, a festival in Sigtuna letting people gather around the written word, talking about the power of the word, and celebrating reading and writing was just a dream. Sigtuna has been a meeting place for over 1,000 years, and many are the writers who found Sigtuna an excellent place to spend time and to find inspiration. We could not think of a better place than Sigtuna for a feast. My name is Camilla Sedendal, and I am the CEO of Destination Sigtuna. And we are the organizers behind this festival. And I'm one of the people who decided, let's just do it. Let's start a festival. But in so many ways, we are not alone at Destination Sigtuna. Cooperation is in Sigtuna's soul. And cooperation, in the true meaning of the word, stands behind this festival. You know that the whole town has rallied to make this the best 2 days that we can ever imagine. Our vision is that the talks that we have should be as accessible as possible for each and every one, and that the festival should really take over the town. And that's what's going on right now at 16 different venues around Sigtuna. When we build this program, and there's a group of us who do this, we dream a little more. We think about who we would really like to have to come and visit us. Or actually, to be honest, we just tried to build a program that we ourselves would like to go to. This year, the question was, would we dare to ask Mr. Richard Ford, the Pulitzer Prize winner, the PEN Faulkner Award winner, to come to us? We all loved your latest book, Canada. All of Sweden has read it, I think. We asked you, and you said yes. And here you are. Yes.
Come on.
We are so happy. So it's my pleasure to introduce this most pleasant man, a man who truly masters the word, a man who loves Sweden, I dare say, maybe due to his wonderful wife, Christina, who is of Swedish descent. I think that has got something to do with it. Richard will talk with Josette Bushell-Mingo, who is a prize-winning actor, teacher, director, both internationally and here in Sweden. And right now, I know that you are in rehearsal, but this is a job you wouldn't miss for the world. You've read all of Richard's books, and I know that you are very much looking forward to this talk as well as we are. So, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Once more, I'm lowering my voice, using my Royal Shakespeare accent to make sure that we reach everybody all of the time. You can hear me very well. And I have also X-ray eyes, so I can see behind pillars, and even to the lady at the back there, lifting her head in anticipation. I am also aware of the time, so I will be very selfish, and I'm going to jump in. The reason we were late, actually, was because you and I were sauntering down the street, talking about all sorts of things, about life, about some of the politics behind the book that we are going to concentrate on today, which is The Great Canada. The first question I had for you, actually, was how did Canada come about? How was it? You have a huge, colossal work behind you, and I can, of course, read through the prize winnings that you have earned. We are talking about, of course, the Pulitzer Prize. We're also talking about the PEN Prize. We're talking about the Penn and Faulkner Award for one book, Independence. I mean, extraordinary history of work, of literature, of short stories. When I have been experiencing your work and I came into Canada, the first question after the first 6 chapters was, how did this book come about? What drew you to write this story?
Well, probably for anybody's project like that, there are always a confluence of very different sorts of energies. And by the way, thank you for putting up with my English.
Very good.
I'm very appreciative. First of all, wanted to write a book. That's sort of most any author's first inspiration. I want to write a book, and I wanted to write a book because I had read a lot of books, and I thought that books change your life in some ways, and so that was my principal inspiration all of these 45 years. Canada came along because I was interested in the life of a little boy, which I totally made up, interested in the life of a little boy who, against his will, gets taken across a border from the United States into Western Canada. There was just something about that border crossing which had for me what Catherine Ann Porter calls a commotion. We're always experiencing, all of us, whether we write books or we don't write books, we're always experiencing something which creates a special little sensation in us. And for writers, that's a call to language.
Yes.
So the thought that a boy would be taken across this border against his will for reasons I didn't know just had, for me, this terrific sensation. And because it was crossing over a border from Montana, where would that border be but into Canada, which is right above Montana? Yes. And then that brought into play another whole set of enthusiasms, which was an enthusiasm for the country of Canada. Most Americans think that Canada's boring, probably the way you all think of Norway. But in fact, Canada is not boring, just as Norway is not boring. And what novels are trying to do is to violate, in some ways, to penetrate the conventional wisdom. And I said to my publisher, who said, nobody's going to like a book about Canada. I said, they will when they read what I write. So Canada, for me, had also a set of appeals. And one of those appeals was just the word itself, the word Canada. I liked it in my ear. I liked the number of syllables it has. I liked the number of A sounds. And when you write a book, you're always mostly drawn to the language you're going to use. And I knew if I wrote a book called Canada, that the word Canada would appear in my book many.
Plunge into Canada. I wanted to ask you, from your own, what kind of influences from your own upbringing, from what impacted you in your life? I also know you were involved quite a lot with Hurricane Katrina as well.
Yes.
So the Mississippi, the Southern, how did that impact on your writing?
Well, I kind of have to make this up because it's so instinctual to me. I did live, when I was young, through a very tumultuous time in the South. And what I thought was the effect of large events and large ideas was on the intimate lives of individuals. So for me, all novels are basically political in nature.
Yes.
Because you are always being affected and influenced by large ideas down at the level of your own day-to-day existence. And so what I always thought was interesting to do was to try to draw a connection between intimate lives, which might seem to be immune to large ideas, to those large ideas. And what you do in writing a novel is you just put them in. You just stick them in and see if you can make things connect, whether or not individuals know they are connected or not. And then when you prove a connection, that in some ways alerts the reader to forces in her or his life which might not have been recognized.
Yes, absolutely. We were also talking when we came down, excuse me, when we came down the street now, we were talking about the characters, some of the characters, and something particularly of something that I noted, of course, are the African-American characters that are mentioned. And throughout all of your novels, your short stories, you refer to many of the Jewish background, German background, African-American background. Did that ever, for me, it was interesting to actually be present in your books. This was something we spoke about, that often literature forgets that there are other communities in existence at that time. Yeah. And this, for me, can be problematic with certain types of literature. But I wanted also to pursue that. In Sweden, of course, we have a very different outlook today. Many of you who know my work or know that I deal with issues of diversity, of inclusion, of being part of the society. And one of the things that you do brilliantly in all your work is to create characters' voices that everyone can access. Right. I wanted to ask you, finally, in terms of influences about the issue of culture and race within your books, have you at any point found it difficult, or was it just natural to include these people in there? For example, in Canada, you know, we're referred to as Negroes or Africans, you know, and that's it. It's the voice of the character that's speaking. Right. It's not Richard himself. Right. But was that ever a challenge for you? Or was it, again, quite a natural?
No, I always thought of it, Josette, as an opportunity. I mean, in America, we were talking about race. You know, whites write about whites and blacks write about blacks, and for the most part, those two precincts don't overlap. But that's just conventional wisdom, and that's just that's just, you know, mind control. Exactly. The fact is, I grew up in a society which was apartheid. But I also grew up in a society in which I was constantly exposed to other races and to other religions. And so it was just natural to me to put those other races and other religions and other sexual orientations into books because the one great thing about novels and art in general is that it's free. You don't have to write books or write poems or write essays just about what is the conventional mores of your time. You can put in whatever is your experience, and my experience was with all of these other people, and so they come naturally to me. You know, and I've written a lot about race. I think unless the conversation is mutually joined, that the conversation won't get anywhere.
No. Canada itself is a monstrous book. It's a book that draws you in slowly. I have to say, the first chapter, I was like, grrr, his writing's so slow, and he's kind of drawing us kind of bit by bit. Your mercurial sense with the words is quite exhilarating, I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, he's so shy. Thank you. It's fantastic. It's an absolutely acrobatic thing that you do. You take license with how long the writer can sustain itself, how long the characters can speak and share their thoughts.
Don't go on too long about this. You're going to drive these people away from my book.
No. They've read it, all of them. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit more in terms of Canada, really, was the central boy, Dell himself. Yeah. And this unique voice that you've had. And I say that because I'm not a literary person. I'm not sitting here pretending I come from that background, but that was the effect that it had on me. Yeah. I wanted to know a bit more about Dell, this unique 15-year-old boy whose parents go through something quite extraordinary, unbelievable, and his life is changed. So my question to you, how did he come to you? Or did you choose him? Did you know he was there already in Canada?
No, he wasn't there. I made him up. But you know, to be a novelist, and you know this being an actor, your job is to impersonate other people, and so that's really my job. As through the agency of language on the page, I try to create the illusion that somebody's there. We know nobody's there, but we create that illusion. And for me, the persona of a 15-year-old white boy was not a very difficult person to impersonate, because in some ways my own development is somewhat slowed, let's say. When I was 16, my father died in my arms. That was a very vivid time in my life. I remember it very vividly, and not that this doesn't happen in this book, but it was just a time in life when I was hypersensitive to what was going on around me. And we all know that that middle to late adolescence is a transitional time in life, as you sort of gravitate out of adolescence and into young adulthood. It just seemed natural to me that you could set a child at this period of life and it would be dramatic. I'm always looking for things to put on the pages that are dramatic, and that seemed to me to be dramatic. Also, I want to make clear, it's not that hard a thing to do. If it was a really hard thing to do, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. But think about your own lives. If you wanted to think back to the time when you were 16 years old and write something on a page that was, you thought, authentic and that was faithful to that time, you could probably do it. There's nothing magical about being a writer. Sometimes if you do it, something magical happens. But most of the things that writers do, imaginative writers, anybody could do, but we're just desperate enough to think it's a living. I mean, you have to, I know in Europe it's very, very standard for writers to hold their brows and pull their chins and talk about how sensitive and artistic they are. But look at me, for Christ's sake.
You're totally unsensitive, totally
no. It's just most of the things that writers do are just normal life.
And that's quite important to you, I think, within your writing.
It is, because I have to live that life.
Yes.
When I get up in the morning, I don't think to myself, the writer has awakened. He's putting on his pajamas. Well, I was supposed to have my pajamas on before.
Yes.
That's right. That's what happens, right.
But I think that's, again, one of the traits that I'm discovering in our very short meeting together is the need, the reality of saying that what I do is an everyday craft. Yes. What I do is an everyday job, and I think it's a real kind of ricochet for the audience. You can see people going, yes, but you are Richard Ford. It must be every day you get up and I have arisen. But for you it is an everyday work, and that you give that over, that others, as a lady there smiling, I could write. I could write. I think that's an extraordinary
Well, I wouldn't want to portray myself to the world in any way that would discourage anybody who thought she or he could write from doing it. And the other thing, too, is that, novels are so much about life. They fundamentally affirm life by saying to the reader, I am all about life, therefore life must be worthy of our attention. So since I'm living that every day, it seems worthy of my attention not to rise above it, not to want to transcend it falsely.
I think you do it in a very, bringing it down a little so I won't be over the top, but in quite an extraordinary way. The way you maintain that level of humanity behind the characters. And there's something that comes across for me all the time. People have used it in various quotes. I can't write better than Svenska Dagbladet or The Independent in London, but your ability to show us that the everyday acceptance and the everyday absence in life is okay. This, I think, is an extraordinary work that you have done.
Literature, there's a definition of literature. Literature is the supreme means by which we renew our sensuous and emotional life and learn a new awareness. And that's what I think I'm always trying to do, is to reconcile ourselves to our sensuous and emotional lives.
Speaking of sensuous and emotional lives, is it okay?
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is to treat ourselves to a small reading from Canada. It's not actually the beginning. We're going to go a little bit further into the book. I'd like to take a look at a section really for me that describes a philosophy or a series of philosophies that come out in Canada. This is Some Way In. This is Dell's voice. And Dell, the young boy, is beginning to understand that maybe things aren't going quite according to plan, that the signals that his parents are giving him are off kilter. It's actually page just at the bottom there.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the signs, the warnings we think we know about disaster are mostly wrong. A child's view of them is just as likely to be as good as an adult's and might be better. Years ago, I knew a man who hanged himself, a stockbroker with many, many woes and mental problems and don't rip that out. Many, many woes and mental problems and a feeling of hopelessness that nothing good could reach. But in the week that led to his terrible moment, which he'd planned to the last detail, his wife all arranged to find him when she came home from a Florida vacation with her girlfriends. The people who knew him said he seemed to have moved the weight of the world off his shoulders and to be in the most high-flying spirits. He laughed, told jokes, teased people, made plans in a way he hadn't in anyone's recent memory. They believed he'd turned a corner, had figured life out, found a path back to the old self, the person they remembered happily and were excited to have back with them. And then that, swinging from the chandelier in the foyer of the house he'd built only 2 years previous and claimed to love. It's a mystery how we are, a mystery.
Thank you. The reason I chose that section, really, is that for me, in some ways, it kind of examines a through line that comes back, is the mystery. The mystery of our existence, the mystery of life, how we grapple with it. Other themes that rise up as well, of course. And I wanted to know your reactions to the idea of absence and acceptance. How do you respond to those words within Canada?
Well, I write a lot of books about them. That's one of my responses. You know, whenever people say that life is a mystery, I sometimes feel my ears closing. What I want to say is, oh, don't tell me life is a mystery. Tell me something about it. And so that's what I think I do. When I discover something that seems to me mysterious, for instance, how can a man who takes his own life feel wonderful the whole week before he does it? Then what I want to do is I want to give language to that. I want to find a way to prove that is true, rather than just, you know, I don't want to say anything sacrilegious here, but rather than just pointing to mystery and saying, well, we can't figure it out, can we? But there is a correlation between religion and the mysteries of life. I mean, someplace it says in the Bible, faith is the evidence of things unseen. Well, faith in literature, faith in the imagination is evidence of the importance of things we don't know about. So,
Beautiful. I was also thinking another theme that comes up, of course, is borders. You've heard this before, is the idea of borders, both psychological, physical borders, the fact that it's the United States and Canada, for example. So again, are there any reflections on the idea of the border, what that means for you?
Well, you all know this, living in Europe, particularly with the EU, and I know that's
left of it, yes.
Whenever I've crossed a border in my life, I always feel a certain something going on in my chest. And if I cross the border from the United States to Mexico, or from Mexico back to the United States, it's much less the case now in the EU countries where you cross from Canada into Germany, and the signs are the same, and all the stores look the same in the front. But there has been a time in my life when to cross a border excited something in me, anticipation, sometimes a sense of dread, sometimes a sense of enthusiasm. So when I feel those kinds of things, which I still do, then I want to put that onto the page and see what I can say about them, see what I can do to put those sorts of commotions and exhilarations into play. Because that's something we all feel, and I'm always interested in writing about something we all feel.
Yeah, and I think that has been why the books have grown and grown and grown in terms of people. We were talking about it, I think, myself, Dorothea Brumberg, who's here as agent, we were talking about the need for a specific voice today, the need to hear the human voice out into the society that's speaking about, again, not everyday issues, but issues that actually people can link into, that can relate to very, very quickly. One of the other things I think that comes across very clearly in Canada as well is also within Dell, within this young boy, he's able to accept certain things and seemingly, and this is the thing that I always find quite shocking because there were several instances where I thought, surely this young boy must kick off now. He must put his foot down and go, no, it's enough. But he never does in the sense that I describe it. I wanted to explore that a little bit with you, and not only the idea of acceptance, but how Dell deals with some of the issues where he should really let go in terms of his youthness, etc., but he does something else.
Well, Christina and I have been married a long time. I've been together 50 years.
She's sitting here, by the way.
And one of the things we've always done, not to make my life a moral exemplum, because it's not, we stay in the room. When we have conversations of an emotional kind, we stay in the room because I'm interested in knowing what is the next thing she's going to say, and she's interested in the next thing I'm going to say after we've said the terrible things that have made us so angry. So I think the trick is to stay. The trick is to remain and hear what the next thing is that gets said, and not slam the door, not kick out the window, but to be there.
Yes.
And to hear something that somebody was saying. When I'm talking to students, sometimes students are very wont to try to create a dramatic effect, a la Hemingway, and what I say is write the next sentence. Because until you write the next sentence, you won't know what you will have thought. So for me, acceptance is about not closing the door, not kicking it apart, not leaving, but staying. Because then you hear something, you have a chance to hear something, and as a writer, you have a chance to say something that you won't have a chance to otherwise.
No, and I think that's a really exciting and very challenging idea in the book of not affecting that resistance, going with it. And it's not about letting go or giving up, but it's...
No.
And in that space, you find something else, and that is very provocative.
Yeah, it's about staying interested, is really what it's about. Yeah.
I'm curious as well, very much, about some of the other characters, of course. We have Dell, and then we have a rather provocative... Now, this is a discussion we're going to have in private, even though you can see us, which is between the intimacy between... we just say it out, right? Yeah, we just say, okay, everybody knows, more or less, that in the Book of Canada, both Dell and his twin sister, Berna, they have an intimate relationship. In tracing and following Richard's responses to this question time and time again, I want to bring it up again, because the way you navigate the answer. In this particular interview I saw, this relationship was brought up. And the interviewer at the time was a great interview, actually remarked and said, well, this relationship looks a little like incest to me. And your response was very particular.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit your reflection? Maybe it's changed from that interview and those questions?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't changed. This is a moment in this book in which a boy and his twin sister, who are mid-teens, have just suffered to have their parents arrested and put into jail right in front of them. They've been left in their house by themselves, waiting for the juvenile authorities to come and take them away. And what they are is shattered. And they're terrified, and they're alone. And what they do in my book is they get in bed together. And the book isn't particular about what they do when they get in bed together, but what I thought was they cling to each other for survival. Who would you most naturally cling to if it would not be your brother or your sister when you've witnessed such a terrifying and horrible thing? If I wanted to make it incestuous rather than intimate or rather than survivalist, well, then I could have done that. I could write out every detail, but I didn't do that because it wasn't interesting to me, it wasn't important to me what they did. It was only that they had each other.
Yes, and that it was part of their life. It was
part of their lives. And I never thought of it as incestuous. but then maybe that's just my naivete. I don't have a sister.
And I didn't either. I didn't either. I thought the response was very interesting. And also what you did was you also developed the idea of the role of the writer in that sense.
Yes.
You know, what is the role of the writer? For any of us who are working in culture at all, it doesn't matter if it's film, photography, I don't care. What is the role? What is our role? We do the same thing. We're just doing it from different perspectives. Right. And in that, and I could see the interviewer was getting a little kind of straight-backed and, so that's how you interpret it then, Mr. Ford.
Right.
And you were very naughty. You were going, yeah, my job is to do. My job is to. Your job is to.
Well, my job is to be free. And so when I, writing a scene is for me an opportunity. So I have a boy and his sister in a room together, and under these very straitened circumstances, I want to make them do something that's interesting. I don't want to make them do something that's boring. I don't want to make them do something that will just make you think, oh, yes, yes, oh, yes, yes, that, of course. No, I want to stretch the limits of what's tolerable. But it's because it's on the page.
Exactly.
It's safe. It's, what we read on the page is free. If we don't like it, we can close the book and say, nope, that's it, Ford, he's terrible. But what I hope to do is to try to make something that you've never thought of before interesting to you and tolerable and restorative.
And I think those things happen. One of your peers, David Grossman, who I'm going to be meeting in a couple of weeks from now. So I've been reading your literature and I'm into his literature, and I'm sandwiched between greatness. I'm sitting at home in my bed with these books on either side. But
he's a great writer.
It would be very nice to have you two in the same room together. Have you met him?
Yeah.
Yeah, several times.
Let me say something about David, David Grossman, the Israeli writer.
Yeah.
Christina and I were with him one time, and I think it was in Norway, and he was talking about what it was like to live in Israel at the time. And he said that the kids go out and get in the school bus, and that he and his wife had a little practice, which was just at the last minute, he had 2 children, at the last minute to bring one of them back in the house. And so that they had to go to school by another mode of conveyance, so that if the school bus was blown up, they didn't both get blown up. And for me, that's tantamount to what I have Berner and Dell doing, that they are holding on to each other so desperately, and ultimately David's son was killed.
Yeah.
But he was in the army by this time. He was a late teenager and maybe 20 years old. Was killed in a bomb blast in Israel. So.
No, I was just going to say the only reason I brought him up was because of your description of how you dealt with this relationship with Dell and Berner, which was also as well. He says that the artist who is free should make it his job to write about freedom, in no matter what way, to show the world that it does not have to be closed, to give light to these things, to make sure that the rest of the world knew what it looked like. Within Canada, you take Dell through 3 parts. What's quite interesting is to watch how the first part is much bigger than the middle, and then the last part really just shrinks down.
Right.
It really does. You also mention as well that he operates in 2 voices.
Yes.
You have both the 15-year-old and the 65-year-old towards the end of the book, and they kind of intermeet. Out of this comes a very interesting tension between reflection and remembering. Do you think that not the very end of the book, but certainly in the middle of the book, when Dell is reflecting on what's going on, this is the very middle part now, when he's actually almost crossed over, how much does Dell know about what's going to happen to him? The reason I say this is because something that you've said, which is if a person, the audience, knows what's about to happen, then it's not been going very well. You often write situations where we think we know, and then it suddenly changes.
Right.
How important is that to you, that you always make sure that a situation never holds, it never stays the same, it's always slightly broken?
Well, that's probably part and parcel of how I go about writing anything. I mean, we all think we're going to walk out of this church and we know what we're going to find out there in the light. Well, we don't. We think we do. We operate as though we do. It's happened that way always to us before. But if you're an Israeli, for instance, you don't know. So for me to write books is always a matter of negotiating, navigating the unknown, because that's my whole sense of one of the things that makes life dramatic, which is that we don't know what's going to happen to us, and we have to act as if we do. So both of those things are happening at once, both on the structural level in my book, this book Canada, on the personal level of all the characters. Canada is narrated by a man who's 65 years old, about a time when he's 15 years old. So at any given moment in the book, the character who's narrating it knows what's going to happen, and I have to create the illusion that he's a 15-year-old boy and doesn't know what's going to happen. So that tensiveness in the book, it's very much like the tensiveness of life, I think. I mean, I was 65 when I was writing this book, so I had a strong sense of what that was like.
And we've both discovered we share the same birthday.
We share the same birthday.
16th of February, 1964.
Josette is much older than I am.
Of course. As you can see. There are a couple of characters, because the reason I'm speaking in such a metaphorical way is that you need to go out and you need to get this. I dare you. I dare you to. I dare you to follow the path of this boy. When Dell eventually crosses...
It should be said, it's in Swedish from Bromberg.
It is. It is in Swedish in Bromberg. We say it again.
In the original Swedish.
When Dell crosses over into Canada, he meets an array of characters in what is this open, and at one point I think you've quoted it as the forgotten prairie, this expanse of America at that time, or Canada, excuse me, at that time.
It's America. The Canadians think they live in America, and Americans think we don't live in Canada. It's all America. It's all North America.
It's all North America. One of the most fascinating characters is someone called Charlie Quarters. It's quite a brilliant creation, really, quite a frightening creation, I have to say. Can you describe him a little bit for me while Dorothea gives me a signal of how much time I have? 5, thank you. Yep.
Well, Charlie Quarters is a Métis, and what Métis means is a cross-racial character who is part French, not that French is a race, but an Indian. But a Canadian Native American, First Nations, they would say, in Canada. And he has this strange combination of sophistication and primitivism. And he dresses not like a woman, but sometimes he dresses with a woman's makeup.
Yep.
And he was just, for me, a joy to write because he seemed to be a free radical in the book. But I also, because Christina and I have lived in South Louisiana so much of our life, we have come upon these strange cross-racial, half French, sometimes half black, half French, sometimes half Indian characters, and their cross-racial character, in a way, liberates them from the conventions of either side.
And they meet culturally, they meet physically, they meet in both what they look like, but also...
That's right. And they do, in fact, present a very provocative person to you when you find them.
And also a wonderful persona for Dell to meet. And their relationship is never reconciled, really.
No.
They never... And this is one of the beauties of, I think, the creations in both Canada and, of course, in the other books of Independence Day. And so all these colossal meetings that just kind of almost just shatter a little bit when they meet. They never are, and now we're together. That never happens. And it's quite distressing and quite exhilarating.
Well, the notion of closure, I don't know if Sweden is as obsessed with the word closure as Americans are.
Are we obsessed with the word closure? No. No.
No, well, good. You shouldn't be, because it never happens. Sometimes people will say, well, I want something, if someone dies, then everybody who survives wants somehow to gain closure. Well, you never gain closure. And literature can portray that. It's not to say that you don't get reconciled. It's not to say that you don't accept the loss of someone. But you never close the book on it. Anybody who's ever been in your life is still in your life. Anybody you've ever cared for, you still care for. It doesn't go away.
No. We're coming to the last minutes now. Mrs. Broomberg is nodding her head like this. And I know there are so many. I suppose my final question then, and then I have 3 quick questions, which are very silly for you. But I don't know which one to choose, but...
Choose the easy one.
Why do you write?
Because I read.
Sorry, I know you all wanted me to ask something else, but...
No, I write simply because I read, and I'm from Mississippi, and I was able, when I was in my late teens, to read really great writers. I read Faulkner, and I read Eudora Welty, who lived in my neighborhood, and so I realized from a reader standpoint what a piece of great literature can do to change your life, and I thought to myself, gee, wouldn't it be great to dedicate your life to doing that for someone else?
Wonderful. So here are my quick questions. This is just between myself and Richard. If you were a good wine, which kind of wine would you be?
I would be necessarily a white Burgundy.
Okay, that's it. If you were a sandwich, what would you be? I would be cheese and pickle.
I'd be a pate sandwich.
Dark pate?
Yes. No, the real pate.
Real pate, excuse me. And finally, if you were a book, what book would you be, Mr. Ford?
I'd be all books, because fortunately one doesn't have to choose one book.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that was one of the smartest and most generous ends to this discussion. Again, I thank you very much for your time and your patience.
Thank you, darling.
The great Mr. Richard Ford, thank you. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Lovely, thank you.